They call it Marrowick. A name whispered with fear and dread, a place where shadows cling to broken walls and whispers echo through empty corridors. It stands on a windswept hill, a monument to suffering and despair. Locals tell tales of tortured souls trapped within its decaying walls, their cries carried on the night wind. They say it's haunted. Blackridge Asylum, a place of shattered minds and broken spirits. It once housed the unwanted, the forgotten, the mentally ill. Now it houses only darkness. I've always been a skeptic. I don't believe in ghosts or demons or things that go bump in the night. But something about Marrowick calls to me, challenges my skepticism. Whatever the reason, I'm drawn to it. The old iron gates creak open, as if welcoming us into the belly of a beast. We step inside and the gates clang shut behind us, sealing our fate. The air inside is cold and damp, thick with the smell of decay. Dust motes dance in the faint light filtering through the grimy windows. The heavy oak door groaned as I pushed it open, the sound echoing through the cavernous entryway. Dust motes danced in the pale sliver of light that pierced through a crack in the boarded-up windows. The air was heavy, stagnant, thick with the smell of decay and something else. Something unsettling. My hand trembled as I raised the camera, its lens a single eye peering into the oppressive darkness. The silence was almost absolute, broken only by the sound of our own breathing and the crunch of our footsteps on the debris-strewn floor. But it wasn't a peaceful silence. It was a heavy, oppressive silence, pregnant with the weight of unspeakable horrors, of whispered secrets, and anguished cries echoing through the years. I ran my hand along the cold, damp wall, my fingers tracing the outline of what was once a doorway, now bricked up as if to contain something monstrous within. Each room we explored seemed to whisper a new tale of horror. Restraints lay discarded on rusting beds, their leather straps cracked and brittle. A solitary chair sat in the center of a padded cell, its surface stained a dark, indeterminate color. Medical instruments lay scattered on a tray, their once gleaming surfaces now dull with age and neglect. We rounded a corner and stumbled upon a room that made my blood run cold. It was a nursery, its walls adorned with faded murals of cartoon animals and storybook characters, a grotesque juxtaposition to the horror that permeated every inch of this place. Tiny cribs lined the walls, their paint peeling, their mattresses stained and torn. A rocking horse stood frozen in mid-gallop, its once bright paint faded to a sickly yellow. We pressed on, each step deeper into Marrowick feeling like a descent into the abyss. The air grew heavy with the weight of untold suffering. The silence punctuated by the creaking of the building and the frantic pounding of my own heart. We stumbled upon a room that chilled me to my core, a place where even the shadows seemed to recoil. It was a room filled with filing cabinets, their metal drawers rusted shut, their surfaces coated in dust and cobwebs. Hours melted away as we sifted through the fragmented records, each page a glimpse into a fractured mind, a whispered plea for help lost in the echoing silence of Marrowick. The air grew thick with dust and despair, each breath a struggle. Then, I found it. A file, partially burned, the name scrawled across the front in faded ink sending a chill down my spine. My heart pounded in my ears as I reached for the small handheld recorder, an essential tool in my quest to document the truth, no matter how unsettling it may be. The red light flickered to life, casting an eerie glow across the room as I held my breath, the silence pressing in on me like a physical weight. A faint static crackled through the speaker, then a sound that sent shivers down my spine. A child's voice, barely audible, whispering through the static like a phantom from beyond the veil. The air in the room seemed to crackle with an unseen energy, a palpable sense of dread settling over me like a shroud. The whispers started subtly at first, barely audible above the pounding of my own heart. They swirled around me, disembodied voices slithering through the darkness, their words indecipherable yet filled with an unmistakable malice. The temperature plummeted, a sudden chill that pierced through my jacket as if the very air had turned to ice. A chill wind seemed to emanate from the very walls of the corridor leading to the nursery ward, a palpable wave of despair that sent shivers down my spine. The air grew heavy, the silence oppressive, as if the weight of 1,000 tormented souls pressed down upon us. The flashlight beam trembled in my hand, casting flickering shadows that danced like phantoms along the walls. The air was thick with the dust of ages, each inhale a gritty reminder of the countless children who had suffered within these walls. The nursery ward lay at the end of the corridor, a cavernous room shrouded in an almost palpable darkness. The door hung precariously from its hinges, its surface scratched and gouged as if clawed by 1,000 tiny hands. The air within was thick with the dust of ages, a musty, oppressive weight that settled deep in my lungs. A single ray of moonlight pierced through a crack in the boarded-up windows, illuminating a scene of unimaginable sadness. Drawn by an unseen force, I found myself moving towards the far wall of the nursery, my flashlight beam trembling in my hand. The air here was thick with a palpable energy, a sense of something unseen yet undeniably present. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, my heart pounded against my ribs like a frantic bird trapped in a cage. And then I saw it. A section of the wall seemingly untouched by the passage of time, its surface covered in a kaleidoscope of childish drawings. Crayon markings, vibrant and full of life, stood in stark contrast to the decaying grandeur of the rest of the asylum. It was a jarring juxtaposition, a testament to the innocent minds that had once sought solace within these walls. There were drawings of flowers, of stick figures holding hands, of smiling suns beaming down from a bright blue sky. But one image in particular caught my eye, its simplicity both haunting and heartbreaking. A single word, scrawled in a child's unsteady hand, its letters a vibrant red that seemed to pulse against the grimy wall. Alice. The name hung in the air, a whispered plea, a phantom echo of a life cut tragically short. The air around me seemed to crackle with an unseen energy, the temperature plummeting as a wave of sadness washed over me. Alice's presence was palpable here, her story etched onto the very fabric of this room. It was a chilling reminder of the darkness that festered within Merriwick's walls, a darkness that consumed all who dared to enter its grasp. The scent of burnt wood hung heavy in the air, a sharp and acrid contrast to the musty decay of the rest of the asylum. It was a scent that spoke of violence, of destruction, of a fire that had consumed more than just wood and stone. It spoke of lives lost, of innocence stolen, of a darkness that had taken root within these walls and refused to let go. The official story was that the fire that had ultimately shuttered Merriwick's doors had originated in the nursery ward. But as I stood there, surrounded by the ghosts of children and the lingering scent of charred wood, I couldn't shake the feeling that something about the official account didn't ring true. The air crackled with an unseen energy, a palpable sense of unease that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. I knelt down, running my fingers over the scorched floorboards, their surface rough and uneven beneath my touch. The wood crumbled beneath my fingertips, disintegrating into a fine ash that spoke of a fire that had burned with an unnatural intensity. It wasn't the remnants of a simple accident, I realized with a growing sense of dread. It was the aftermath of something far more sinister. As I stood there, the weight of Merriwick's horrors pressing down on me like a physical weight, I couldn't escape the feeling that the fire that had ravaged this room was more than just a tragedy. It was a warning, a testament to the darkness that festered within these walls, a darkness that consumed all who dared to uncover its secrets. A strange sensation washed over me, a prickling at the back of my neck, as if unseen eyes were watching my every move. The air in the nursery grew heavy, the silence pressing in on me like a physical weight. The scent of burnt wood intensified, a phantom smell that spoke of a fire that had burned long ago, yet still lingered in the very fabric of this place. My breath caught in my throat as I noticed something out of the corner of my eye, a flicker of movement at the far end of the hallway, a fleeting glimpse of something that shouldn't be there. I froze, every muscle in my body tense, my heart pounding against my ribs like a frantic bird trapped in a cage. The camera trembled in my hand, its lens a single eye peering into the oppressive darkness. I strained to see through the gloom, my mind struggling to make sense of what my eyes refused to believe. The hair on the back of my neck stood on end, a primal instinct warning me of danger, urging me to turn and run. The flicker of movement came again, this time closer. A shadow detached itself from the darkness, slowly taking on a vaguely human form. It was slender, childlike, its edges blurred and indistinct as if it were woven from the very shadows themselves. I raised the camera, its weight a strange comfort in the face of the growing unease that threatened to consume me. The flashlight beam trembled, casting dancing shadows that only heightened the surreal, nightmarish quality of the moment. My finger hovered over the record button, but a strange paralysis gripped me, a fear so profound that it transcended my instinct to document. The figure in the hallway remained motionless, its back to me, its head tilted at an unnatural angle as if listening intently to some distant, unheard sound. It was a tableau of utter wrongness, a scene ripped from the pages of a nightmare and projected onto the decaying canvas of Blackridge Asylum. It wore a long, white gown that hung loosely from its skeletal frame, the fabric stained and yellowed with age. Its hair, if it could be called that, was long and matted, cascading down its back like a waterfall of darkness. I couldn't make out any distinguishing features, no face, no hands, only the vague outline of a child frozen in a state of perpetual sorrow. A wave of sadness washed over me, so profound that it threatened to buckle my knees. It was the weight of 1,000 unspoken words, a symphony of sorrow played out on the strings of my soul. This was no ordinary apparition, I realized with a growing sense of dread. This was something far more ancient, far more malevolent. Just when I thought the terror couldn't possibly intensify, a voice, barely audible above the pounding of my own heart, sliced through the oppressive silence. It was high-pitched, childlike, yet imbued with an ancient quality that sent shivers down my spine. It seemed to emanate not from the figure itself but from the very walls of the asylum, as if the building itself were whispering its secrets. "Alice," the voice whispered, its tone a chilling blend of innocence and malice. "Alice is here." The words hung in the air, a spectral echo that seemed to cling to the shadows, their meaning both clear and utterly terrifying. The name Alice, already etched into my psyche from the patient records and the nursery wall, now reverberated through my very being, a tangible link to the darkness that festered within Blackridge's walls. My hand trembled, the camera shaking violently as I fought to maintain my grip. My breath caught in my throat, a strangled gasp that echoed through the silence like a death rattle. I knew, with a certainty that defied logic or reason, that I was standing on the precipice of something truly horrific, something that threatened to shatter my sanity and drag me down into the abyss. The figure in the hallway turned slowly, its movements jerky and unnatural, like a marionette controlled by an unseen hand. I held my breath, my heart pounding against my ribs like a drumbeat of doom. The flashlight beam flickered, casting grotesque shadows that danced and writhed along the walls, their forms shifting and contorting into monstrous visages that seemed to mock my terror. The hallway stretched out before me, a tunnel of darkness that beckoned me forward with a siren song of dread. The air grew colder, the scent of burnt wood so intense now that it stung my nostrils, the taste of ash filling my mouth like a premonition of my own demise. Fear, primal and overwhelming, threatened to paralyze me, to root me to the spot where I stood. But a strange curiosity, a morbid fascination with the unknown, warred with my better judgment. I had come to Blackridge, seeking answers, seeking the truth behind the legends, and now it seemed the truth was revealing itself, beckoning me down a path from which there might be no return. The air grew noticeably colder as we descended deeper into the bowels of the asylum, a damp, earthy chill that seeped through our jackets and sent shivers crawling down our spines. Each step on the creaking wooden stairs echoed with a hollow finality, a stark reminder that we were venturing further and further from the realm of the living. The flashlight beams danced and flickered as we moved, casting grotesque, elongated shadows that writhed and contorted along the rough-hewn stone walls. The air hung heavy with the weight of secrets, a palpable sense of dread that tightened its grip with each descending step. It was as if the very walls were watching us, their unseen eyes boring into our souls, judging our every move. The stench intensified as we reached the bottom of the stairs, a nauseating blend of mildew, decay, and something far more sinister that defied identification. It spoke of dark rituals, of unspeakable acts performed under the cover of darkness, of a place where sanity went to die and nightmares were given flesh. A single bare bulb hung precariously from a frayed wire at the bottom of the stairs, casting a sickly yellow glow that did little to penetrate the oppressive gloom. It illuminated a vast cavernous space, its far reaches lost in shadow. Rows upon rows of metal shelving units stretched out before us, their surfaces coated in dust and cobwebs, their contents shrouded in an eerie silence that whispered of forgotten horrors. The basement, we soon discovered, was a repository of Marowic's darkest secrets, a chilling testament to the depths of human depravity. The shelves were laden with files, their edges crumbling, their contents a horrifying chronicle of the asylum's history. Each page we uncovered revealed another layer of the nightmare, a glimpse into the minds of those who had suffered within these walls. The physician's notes, scrawled in hurried, almost illegible handwriting, spoke of experimental treatments, of radical procedures performed without consent, of minds and bodies twisted and broken in the name of science. There were photographs too, their edges faded and torn, their subjects staring back at us with hollow eyes that seemed to follow our every move. We uncovered evidence of electroshock therapy, of lobotomies performed with crude instruments, of patients restrained and subjected to unimaginable horrors. The air grew thick with the weight of their suffering, a palpable sense of despair that clung to us like a shroud. The silence of the basement was no longer empty, but filled with the phantom screams of the tortured, their anguish echoing through the decades. As we delved deeper into the heart of the basement, our flashlight beams illuminated something that sent a chill down my spine. There, on the far wall, partially obscured by cobwebs and grime, was a symbol. It was ancient, etched into the stone with a precision that spoke of a time long before Blackridge Asylum, a time when these grounds served a far more sinister purpose. The symbol was intricate, a series of concentric circles intersected by lines and strange angular markings. It seemed to pulsate in the dim light, a malevolent presence emanating from its depths. I had seen symbols like this before, in ancient texts, in studies of forgotten religions, in the nightmares that plagued my sleep. This was a symbol of power, of something ancient and evil, something that had slumbered beneath Blackridge Asylum for centuries, waiting for the right moment to awaken. Its presence here in this place of suffering and despair was no accident. Blackridge, I realized with a growing sense of dread, was more than just an asylum. It was a conduit, a focal point for something dark and unholy that had been drawn to this place of broken minds and shattered spirits. A blood-curdling scream, echoing from the depths of the basement, ripped through the oppressive silence, sending a jolt of primal fear surging through my veins. It was a raw, guttural sound, filled with an agony so profound that it transcended language, a testament to the horrors that had unfolded within these walls. The scream seemed to emanate from a room at the far end of the basement, its heavy metal door slightly ajar, a black maw beckoning us forward with a promise of unimaginable horrors. The air around the door crackled with an unseen energy, a palpable wave of dread that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. My heart pounded against my ribs like a frantic bird trapped in a cage, a drumbeat of fear that echoed the scream still reverberating through the basement. My every instinct screamed at me to turn and run, to flee this place of madness and never look back. But a morbid curiosity, a compulsion to confront the darkness that lurked within, drew me forward, one hesitant step at a time. As we approached the room, the screams intensified, their pitch rising to an unbearable crescendo that threatened to shatter my sanity. The air grew thick with the metallic tang of blood and the cloying sweetness of decay, a scent that spoke of unspeakable acts and unimaginable suffering. The air within the room crackled with an unseen energy, a palpable sense of dread that pressed down on me like a physical weight. The stench of blood and decay intensified, a nauseating miasma that made my eyes water and my stomach churn. I raised the camera, its lens a single eye peering into the heart of the darkness, my finger hovering over the record button. The screams had stopped, replaced by an eerie silence that was somehow more unsettling than the cacophony that had preceded it. The air itself seemed to vibrate with anticipation, the silence pregnant with a terror so profound that it defied description. I felt a cold dread creep up my spine, tightening its grip on my heart with each passing second. Then, as if on cue, the hair on the back of my neck stood on end. A wave of cold air washed over me, carrying with it the unmistakable scent of decay, and something else, something ancient and evil. The single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling flickered and died, plunging us into absolute darkness. For a moment there was nothing but the sound of our own ragged breathing, each inhale a gasp of fear, each exhale a prayer whispered into the void. Then, a faint glow, emanating from the far corner of the room, pierced the oppressive darkness. It pulsed with an unnatural light, casting flickering shadows that danced and writhed along the walls like living things. As my eyes slowly adjusted to the dim light, the shape of the entity began to solidify, resolving itself from the shadows with agonizing slowness. It was taller than any man I'd ever seen, its form towering over us like a grotesque parody of human anatomy. It was impossibly thin, almost skeletal, its limbs elongated and twisted at unnatural angles, but it was the entity's face, or lack thereof, that sent a jolt of pure terror through my veins, a terror so profound that it threatened to shatter my sanity. Where its face should have been, there was only a smooth, featureless expanse of skin, as pale and cold as moonlight on a tombstone. It was an absence of humanity so complete, so utterly alien, that it seemed to mock the very concept of a soul. Then, with a slowness that made my blood run cold, the entity moved. It raised its long, spidery arms, its movements fluid and graceful despite its grotesque appearance. The shadows on the walls seemed to writhe and contort in response, mimicking the entity's movements as if they were extensions of its will. I stumbled back, my foot catching on a loose floorboard. The camera slipped from my grasp, clattering to the ground with a sickening thud. The entity paused, its head tilting slightly as if listening, its blank face a mask of eternal hunger. Panic surged through me, a primal scream trapped in my throat. I scrambled back, my hands scrabbling against the cold, damp floor, desperate for purchase, for escape. But the entity was faster. It glided towards us, its movements swift and silent, a predator closing in on its prey. The air around it crackled with an unseen energy, a palpable wave of dread that made my lungs seize and my vision blur. I saw the terror reflected in the eyes of my companions, their faces pale and drawn in the eerie light. They were frozen in place, paralyzed by the same primal fear that had me in its grip. We were trapped, lambs led to the slaughter, our fate sealed within the bowels of this cursed place. The entity's arms reached out, its long, bony fingers tipped with what looked like razor-sharp claws. I closed my eyes, bracing myself for the inevitable, but the pain never came. Instead, I felt a searing cold envelop me, a coldness that seemed to seep into my very bones, stealing the warmth from my body, the breath from my lungs. I opened my eyes, my vision swimming, and saw that the entity was gone. The room was plunged into darkness once more, the only sound the frantic pounding of my own heart. Disoriented and gasping for air, I stumbled back, my hands outstretched, searching for something, anything, to steady myself. My fingers closed around cold, rough stone, the texture a jarring contrast to the smooth, otherworldly chill that still clung to my skin. The darkness was absolute, a suffocating weight pressing in on me from all sides, amplifying the frantic thump of my heart against my ribs. My God! A voice rasped beside me, the sound shaky, barely recognizable as belonging to Mark, my cameraman. What was that thing? I shook my head, unable to answer, unable to even process the question. My mind, still reeling from the encounter, felt like a fragile thing, a spider web stretched thin over a chasm of madness, threatening to snap at any moment. We had looked into the abyss, and the abyss had looked back. And in that exchange, something within me had shifted, broken, leaving behind a raw, primal fear that I couldn't shake. We need to get out of here. John's voice, tight with terror, cut through the darkness. John, our paranormal investigator, the skeptic, the one who always had a rational explanation for everything. Even he sounded shaken, his usually steady voice trembling with an emotion I'd never heard from him before. Fear. Utter, soul-crushing fear. Groping blindly in the darkness, I stumbled over something hard and metallic. The camera. Relief, sharp and fleeting, pierced through the terror. If the camera survived, maybe, just maybe, some of the footage did too. Maybe we had proof, evidence of the nightmare we had just witnessed. We moved through the remnants of Blackridge Asylum like sleepwalkers, our senses on high alert, every creak of the floorboards, every sigh of the wind through the broken windows, sending shivers down our spines. The darkness seemed to cling to us, to whisper warnings in a language we couldn't quite understand, but felt in the marrow of our bones. The exit, when we finally stumbled upon it, felt like a beacon of hope in a sea of despair. The heavy oak door, once a symbol of our entrapment, now represented our only path back to the world of the living, back to the realm of reason and sanity. But as I stepped out into the cold, harsh light of dawn, I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't truly free, not entirely. Marowak had a hold on us, its icy fingers wrapped around our souls, its darkness imprinted on our minds like a brand. It had fed on our fear, our curiosity, our vulnerability, and it would continue to feed, I knew, long after we were gone. I glanced back at the asylum, its silhouette stark against the rising sun, a monument to suffering and despair. The windows, like vacant eyes, seemed to follow our every move, their gaze filled with a hunger that transcended the physical realm. We had escaped with our lives, but we had left something behind, something precious and irreplaceable. We had left a part of ourselves within those walls, a sacrifice offered to the entity that resided in the heart of Blackridge Asylum. And as we drove away, the image of the entity, its featureless face, its outstretched arms, burned itself into my mind's eye. A chilling reminder that some doors are not meant to be opened, some horrors not meant to be witnessed. Blackridge Asylum wasn't just haunted, it was hungry, and it would never be sated.